All right. Well, good morning. Good morning. It's so good to see everybody. So we got a lot to do, and tonight it's like always. I feel like I'm always so pressed to talk about stuff. And today we're going to be continuing our discussion of the sacraments. And I got to preface this with a couple of things, because first, this is kind of a two-parter. Okay. So today we're going to be doing part one, and this is going to be the what it is part. And then later on, we begin talking about the pillar of morality and life in Christ. We're going to cover commandments 6 and 9 together, and that's going to be kind of like what marriage is not meant to be. And so today we'll be kind of laying the foundation for the hot topic things that we'll talk about on commandments 6 and 9 later on. But the problem, and this is me speaking, not for a lot of me growing up, I learned like the 6 and 9 part, the commandment 6 and 9 about thou shalt not commit adultery and covet your neighbor's wife first, and it was all a big set of don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, and that wasn't very exciting and appealing to me as a kid growing up. It seems so restrictive, but the reality is that's not how the church is presenting the truth. It's not simply a set of don't do's. It's actually a set of do's, because those do's is what's going to actually bring you joy and give you freedom. Like, that's the important part. But with that, if you're going to do something, that means you're also not going to do other things. So the church obviously has to teach on those as well. So today we're going to be talking about the what is and the do's. What is marriage? Okay. What is marriage meant to be? And what is that demand of us? Okay, moving forward. And these simply aren't idealistic goals for humanity. This is truth. This is how things are created in their natural order. And it's our duty and our blessing if we can chase after these things. So that's what today's going to be about. Just what it's not going to be is I'm not here to give marital advice, okay? I'm a 33-year-old dude with 4 kids. So if you have marital advice, I'll happily take it. My wife is a psychologist. There was at one point we were dating that she was like, maybe I'll be a marriage therapist. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to marry a marriage therapist. That's not going to be okay. So that didn't happen, praise God. So now she's in development, so that's awesome. But what we're going to do today is talk about what the church and what the Lord has revealed to us about marriage. And as a married man, I am a married man for 10 years. I've lived these things, right? I haven't been married for 40 years. I haven't had this privilege of so many wonderful marriages. But 10 years of, feel like we've been through some stuff, had 4 kids, and this is real and true and good and holy from my experiences. And other married people can talk about that as well. But it does require us to, if you think about what God wants marriage to be, it'll change your marriage, our marriages. It's true. It's true. All right. So with that being said, I want to start off with a little question for you. I want everybody, so take out some paper. You got a paper, got a pen. Okay, this is going to be a discussion question. This is going to be for you. If you don't have paper and pen, take your phone out or make a note. Okay, I want everybody to write something down right here. However you want to do it. Don't use the old mental trap for this one. Okay, write it down. Write it down. Digital or physical, doesn't matter. Whatever you want. All right. So here's my question for you. You ready? I think 99% of all people will say that marriage is important, right? That's why so many different various groups fight to define what they think marriage is, because the reality is subliminally we all know it's important, okay? If that's true, which we agree, marriage is incredibly important, what is the husband or wife's most important job in a marriage? Okay, what do you think? All right, this is for you alone, no one else. All right, what do you think the husband and wife's most important job in marriage is? Now, I want you to save that for later, okay? We're going to come back to that, because we'll come back to it in a minute. Now, before we begin talking about the sacrament of marriage, it's always important to review what a sacrament is. Okay, a sacrament is not simply a sign. The American flag, is a sign, right? That is something that points to the sign of our nation, and it stirs up all kind of emotions and things. Signs are very important. A sacrament, though, is different. A sacrament points to something, but it actually makes that reality happen. Okay, the Catechism describes it as an efficacious sign. It's a sign that actually brings about an effect, and that effect is to give us grace to live a life for the Lord. And all of them were instituted by Christ and entrusted to his church all throughout the ages. Okay? And marriage is one of those 7 sacraments. And they're grouped together with this another sacrament, and they are the sacraments of service. Marriage is grouped with the sacrament of holy orders, which seems like an odd pairing, but both of those sacraments are ordered to the service of others. Initiation was baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist, right? Service is holy orders of marriage. Healing was reconciliation, anointing the sick. So we see these marriage sacraments kind of grouped together by what kind of grace they give us to live out the whole Christian life. All right, so here's your first warm up, your table discussion to get the juices flowing on this Sunday morning. You ready? All right, so this is what I want to ask you. Who is the author of marriage? Okay? Who is the author of marriage, would you say? Is it God, right? Was this created and ordained by the Lord? Or is this a human institution only? All right? What do you think? All right? So, I'm going to softball this to the tables. Y'all got 3 minutes. Go around and just share your thoughts. All right. So this is a foundational question, right? This is something that we, as a society, are subliminally arguing about. Where does marriage come from? Okay, is it a God thing? Is it simply a human thing? And your answer to this question is vital. So what does God reveal to us? Like, what can we know from Scripture and from Jesus and what he spoke to us about marriage? So I'm going to give a quick, super quick tour of marriage in the Bible, okay? So, creation, you know the stories of creation. There's 2 of them. Gives us kind of these different views on who God is, right? But if you notice, what is the last thing created in creation as recorded in the book of Genesis? Woman. Boom. You are the pinnacle of creation. Don't let man ever tell you anything different, okay? So, woman. And not only was it woman, but the last thing that we see is when Adam sees Eve, he uses Hebrew covenant language. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, okay? That wasn't just fancy poetry. That was saying that we are now united as one person, right? If you were transported now back into ancient Middle Eastern culture, their marriages would look very different than our marriages today, okay? So what a marriage looks like is cultural. You go around the world. But the foundation of marriage was ordained in the very beginning by the Lord. He created Adam and Eve for one another, okay? The last act we see before the fall is marriage. The Bible ends with marriage. You look in Revelation, the very end, chapter 20, 21. The New Jerusalem comes down, all right? Very metaphorical, symbolic language. But the New Jerusalem comes down and is being wed to the Lamb. The slain Lamb was Jesus Christ. Okay, and St. Paul doesn't speak about this in Ephesians. We'll come back to that. So marriage bookends the Bible. That's a very important theme. The theme of marriage is entire the strand through it. However, though, like everything else, we kind of mess things up. Okay? Chapter 3, the fall happens. We've talked about this a lot. And then not only do you see this disobedience and lots of stuff, but you also see this destruction of marriage happen immediately. In Genesis chapter 6, you read about this guy, and I'm just completely blanking on his name right now. Sorry, I had it written, but it messed up. Genesis chapter 6, we read about, Genesis chapter 4. We read about this guy named Lamech. Genesis chapter 4, verse 23. He's a descendant of Adam and Eve, and a few generations. And he immediately starts bragging, Genesis chapter 4, 23, about all the men that he's killed and all the wives that he's taken. So you see this destruction of marriage that happens immediately after the fall, right? Because God did not create Adam and Eve in a polygamous relationship. It was 2. But because of the fall, we see this immediate, under the regime of sin, the first thing we get is this implicit critique of polygamy in chapter 4. Keep going. We keep reading. Under the Mosaic law. This is vital because we're going to speak of this later. So you keep reading. Then Israelites get enslaved. They come out of Egypt. God brings them to Mount Sinai. Okay? They get the 10 Commandments. They make a covenant right there with the people. And then they immediately break it. It's kind of like another fall. They if you know in your Bible, they throw the gold in, they get a golden calf that comes out and they worship it because that was the gods of Egypt. So you immediately get this fall. And then you get this extensive set of law that has come to us. That's what the entire book of Leviticus is and Deuteronomy, because that the Israelites disobeyed. And one of the things that God now speaking through Moses permits is divorce. And you read about it in the book of Deuteronomy. But Jesus speaks very clearly, this is because of the hardness of heart. Well, why? Because at this time, you couldn't divorce your spouse, right? So what did men do in order to free themselves from a marriage? They killed them. They would murder their wives. That was the common practice. All right, so yeah, right? Now, we think about this, and Jesus makes it very clear. This was not God's plan. But the Israelite people, you got to think of it like children. And God has slowly been teaching and guiding his people throughout the years. Under the new law, which we're going to talk about in a few weeks, we're treated like adults. It seems easier, but it's actually way more harder. We'll talk about why. So God has slowly been preparing his people. But yet in the prophet Malachi, chapter 2, verse 16, God goes on a tear about the sins of the people. And one of the things he says is, I hate divorce. Because it's going back to his original plan. Like many things, our disobedience, like a lot of things in the Old Testament, marred things. Okay, we struggled with things. We marred marriage, but we did not destroy it. So God came to renew all things, just like everything else, right? Without his grace. This is a tough thing to speak on because, just personally, I come from a divorced family. My parents are divorced. I've lived through this. But the idea to talk about what marriage is, okay, and that's the goal of today. So what did Jesus tell us? When we read in our enthronement of the word, it's in the Gospel of Matthew, it's a couple of places you read about this. The Pharisees come and they were trying to entrap Jesus. Big story behind it that Herod was in charge at this point in this area, and Herod was committing adultery. So they're basically trying to trap Jesus, saying, all right, if you say divorce is okay, this is going to be one option. If you say it's not okay, it's going to be the other option. Like, they kind of got Jesus stuck. Like, either you don't know the law, or Herod's basically going to say you're attacking him. Like Jesus Christ, he's God, he knows, right? He knows all these things. So he goes back and he kind of just blows it up. He's like, look, you don't even understand the Old Testament. You're quoting something that's you don't even understand. Because if you go back to the very beginning, the way God created us before the fall, it was meant to be one man, one woman in a unity of flesh. Go back to the beginning. But because of the hardness of heart of humanity, things have been kind of messed up. St. Paul speaks about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10 and 11, that a wife should not separate from her husband and vice versa. And then the 5th chapter of Ephesians, this is just kind of a scriptural overview. We're going to get into some more nitty-gritty in a second. Has this incredible line. He speaks, Ephesians chapter 5 is probably the most misunderstood part of the Bible. If you go to any wedding, you're going to hear this verse. But often like, everybody kind of get like, ooh, that's what the St. Paul really said? Because it starts off, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. Be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, be subject to your husbands as to the Lord. Right? And you're like, oh, that's not okay, right? I mean, it keeps going on and on. This is, though, what St. Paul is speaking about right here. All right? Read that. He speaks about the marriage of a man and a woman, and he says this is a great mystery in reference to Christ and his church. St. Paul, it says marriage is a mystery in the same way that Christ and his church together are a mystery. And he says, husbands, you are meant to mimic what Christ did for his church. Wives, the same thing. What did Jesus Christ do for his church? Died. I agree, yeah. Right? He died. It's men, you are supposed to die to yourself for your wife. Wives, you are meant to die to yourself for your husband. You put their goods above yours. Because that's what he did. He got hung on a cross naked for us. We are meant to do the same thing for our spouses. That is an incredible thing. That is what marriage is meant to be. It's convicting for me as a married man. So, Jesus came to restore God's plan for all things, including marriage, what it was meant to be. So, is marriage a God thing or simply a man thing? The church has always clearly taught this. This is a quote from the Catechism. That the intimate community of life and love which constitute the married state has been established by the Creator and endowed by Him with its own proper laws. God Himself is the author of marriage. Okay? Now this is a big thing, okay? Because if this is true, which it is, this is truth, then this means that marriage is some things and marriage is not some things. Okay? You can't have both. Marriage can't be one thing. That automatically means that marriage cannot be something else. All right? That's anything in the world is like that. So today we're going to talk about the stuff that marriage is. So when you think of marriage, we can describe it in two ways. Two ways. We'll talk about what is marriage, what is the purpose of marriage, and then some of the kind of nitty-gritty stuff in a little bit. So what is marriage? We can think of it with two different words. One is it's a vocation. Okay, a vocation. This word gets thrown out a lot today. Like I'm discerning a vocation, and these kind of buzzwords. And we have a couple of vocations we can think of. First off, we say we all have what's called our universal vocation. We're all called to be holy. Every single person in this room is called to be a saint. The universal call to holiness. So our vocation is to get to heaven first, okay? Now, how we do that, though, varies from person to person. And the Lord gives us a vocation, a kind of state of life that is most apt to help us get to heaven. And that could be ordained life. That could be religious life, all right? That could be a married state. Maybe it's single. But the married state is a vocation. So this is the way that God says that you can best get to heaven. As me, I'm a married man. My job, so if you look down, what did you write down a little bit ago? What is your most important job for a man and a wife to get to heaven? What did you write? Let me hear some answers. Boom. Money, be wealth, like be financially secure. Yes. Stability, yes. Help each other emotionally, yes. In need, yes. When they get sick, help them, yes. All are yeses in good and holy things. The most important job, though, is to help them get to heaven. That's numero uno. I lived that question. Deacon Dave, I don't know if he's in here. You know, I don't know. I want to be Deacon Dave when I get older. I say that all the time. I love Deacon Dave. And I was faced with a question in my life about what to do. What path should I take? All right? Doesn't matter what it was. And I was kind of struggling because I really didn't know what to do. It was kind of between a couple of different good things, right? And I called Deacon Dave up because I look up to him a lot. And I said, Deacon, I'm struggling. What do I do? What should I help with? And he didn't give me an answer, as any good person would do, right? Don't give you the answer, but lead you to the answer. And he said, Darren, what's your job as a husband? This was maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago maybe. And I said, you love him, take care of him, all this stuff. And he's like, that's all true. But your job is to get your children and your wife to heaven, to help them on that process. And he said, Darren, of your two options, which one's going to do that the best? And it was an easy decision at that point. It was easy because I had to pick the one that was going to help my family get to heaven. Not necessarily make the most money or have the biggest career, all those kind of things. It was easy then when you frame it the proper way. So, vocation, one. Covenants is a second one. Covenant's the big word in Scripture. All of Scripture is organized around covenants. That's the way God interacts with His people. And a covenant, though, is very important to understand because it's fundamentally different than what we sometimes think of it. And didn't know this, so I'm blessed to just learn some people. A definition of a covenant is easy. It's an extension of kinship by oath. This is how Dr. Bergsman describes it. What do we mean by that? A covenant is when you extend someone else who is not naturally in your family into your family. This is what God does to us. He extends to us a covenant so that we, who are not naturally, can go into His family as part of Jesus Christ and live with Him forever in heaven. That's the covenant. Nowadays, we see covenants in a couple ways. One is adoption, right? We adopt people and bring them into our family. The second one, though, is a marriage. We take two people who are not naturally in the same family, and we come together to create a family. That's a covenant. That's beautiful. And that is fundamentally different than a contract. A contract like exchanges goods. That would be like prostitution. You exchange something, an action, a good, not a good in like a good sense, but like it's like a haircut thing, service, whatever you want to call it, right? But a covenant's not like that. So marriage is a vocation and a covenant. And when we look at this, there are three people involved in this covenant. It's not just man and woman. It's man, woman, and the Lord. And the idea behind that is if you have this triangle and the man's over here and the woman's over here and God's up here, even when we get fragmented because of we're human and life happens, we're still connected through God, through the Lord. Lastly, what is marriage? God has instituted marriage because it is a reflection of himself. God is not simply, rephrase that question. Let me say something. God is three persons in one nature. He is a community of persons that brings forth life. That is what marriage is. It's a community of people who bring forth life. Like a holy marriage is meant to be a beacon of God to the world. It's a reflection of himself. So, pretty foundational things about marriage. Now, when we think of marriage, we can look at marriage in two ways. So marriage is, the church kind of gives us two ways. First off, you have what's called a natural marriage. So a natural marriage is created by God and it's good. So marriage from the beginning of time was created by God and it was good. Any person who gets married, right, to atheists, to anybody, okay, who gets married, that is a natural marriage and that is a good thing. Their job is still to help each other get to heaven, no matter what you believe or not. Two people from different religions get married. That is a natural marriage and that is a good thing. Okay, that is a marriage. However, when Jesus came, he kind of like stepped it up a little bit, right? And what he's done, he's given us what are called sacramental marriages. A sacramental marriage is where the marriage has been elevated to a sacrament, where you get grace. So not only do you have this good thing, but you are now given the tools to help in the good thing. So when I was married to my wife in the church, we were both baptized Catholics, we were given specific graces to help us live a married life as man and woman. A sacramental marriage. So a sacramental marriage, when both of us are been baptized, when we have been baptized into the body of Christ, we are now open to receive the Lord's graces to help that marriage. Like anything with grace, though, you have to cooperate. You have to cooperate. So two different thoughts there, okay? So, yeah. Cool questions with that before we move on? Because we'll come back to some nitty-gritty stuff in a little bit. All right, now, that's the what. Here's the why, all right? Why marriage? Okay? Like, what is the purpose of marriage? Okay? What is the purpose of marriage? So think about that for a second. What is the purpose of marriage? So when we think of marriage, this automatically takes in the marital act. Okay? What is the purpose of our sexuality? What is the purpose of the marital act? What is the purpose of that? At a very simple, fundamental level. What would you say? Okay, what does that mean? Huh? To be fruitful and multiply. That's right. Make babies. Okay? That's one. Okay? So that is like a fundamental purpose of the marital act, of sexuality. It's simple. Like that's what it's there for. Our bodies have a reproductive system, and the purpose of that reproductive system, okay, is to help participate with God to make life. That's its function. Okay? But it's also unitive. When Adam and Eve looked at each other, they said, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh of my flesh, and let the two become one, because their job is to help each other get to heaven. Okay? So the Catechism defines it in this way. And I've kind of underlined a couple things. So the matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish themselves as a partner for the whole of life is by its very nature ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of children. That is marriage's function. Two people come together not simply to have a good time. Two people come together not just for pleasure. Two people come together not just to make things work out financially. Those are maybe good side things, but its function, its ordered purpose is to unify two people to help them get to heaven and for the procreation and creation of children. Education of children. Because God said in Genesis basically two commandments. Be fruitful and multiply, and the two shall become one flesh. So we simplify this into a unitive and procreative purpose for marriage. And automatically, this is going to bring up some questions. I know automatically in this room, because I was you 10 years ago when my wife was going through RCA. I automatically was like, nope, right? Nope. Why? That makes no sense why we can't use birth control. That makes no sense why if I have an unplanned pregnancy, we can't abort the child. That makes no sense why we can't live together because we love each other. Isn't that good enough? I'm with you. I was there. But when you understand what marriage is meant to be, those questions will fall off. And I live that myself, personally. So I encourage you to get your questions, hold on to them, because this is like part 1 or part 2, and we'll hopefully be able to answer some of those. So, very good. Now, when we look at marriage, the way the sacrament itself is celebrated is public, like a liturgy. Like all the sacraments are meant to be scheduled, be done publicly. Even baptisms and things, we do them publicly. And this sacrament is very unique in that the man and the wife are actually the ministers of the sacrament. The deacon or the priest is the witness, but the man and the woman bestow the sacrament on one another. That's the powerful act there. And this will often occur during Mass. That's a beautiful thing. And we as a man and woman should go to confession first so that you're open to receive these graces. And when we look at marriage, the most important thing about marriage is that both of the people involved are free. Okay? Because marriage is an act of the will. You are choosing this. And we'll talk about divorce and annulments in a little bit, because this is the key thing. A lot of people say, well, annulment, church allows annulments. Isn't that just kind of like a Catholic divorce? And the answer to that question is no. They're two completely different things. A divorce, which Jesus very clearly says is not possible, that strictly goes against his commandments, is when you say a marriage existed and a marriage ended on this day, right? We got married January what? We got divorced in February what? An annulment, the purpose of an annulment is to look at that marriage and say, because of some reason, whatever it may be, that marriage actually didn't exist to begin with. There is no annulment date. It goes back to the very beginning and say what actually happened there wasn't actually a marriage. And these are very personal and challenging things to go through. I experienced it in my own family. So this is a big, big, big issue. And this is challenging to talk about, right? Because we have these lived experiences that this is hard. So some of the things that would make a marriage not actually valid, right? You have to be at the proper age. So you have the proper will to choose this. A 12-year-old person probably doesn't understand what they're getting themselves into. You have to be able to complete the sexual act. Why? Because the purpose of marriage is for the procreation of children. If you can't do that, you're taking away a part of why marriage exists. You can't obviously be married to someone else before. There's lots of different reasons. You couldn't be free of coercion. You can't be forced into marrying somebody. That's not a marriage. You can't be forced to love someone. It doesn't work that way. And there's lots of different things that could take place here. And when you go into a marriage, the exchange of the vows is where you are promising certain things. When you go into a Catholic church and a Catholic marriage, you're exchanging vows and you're promising things. So an annulment is looking at when you got up there on the altar and you said, I do, or yes to these questions, were you actually being truthful, whether consciously or subconsciously? Okay? So what do those vows look like? What are the vows you take at a Catholic marriage? So these are the questions you'll be asked. Will you accept children lovingly from God and bring them up according to the law, typo there, of Christ and his church? Will you accept children lovingly from God? Okay, that is a foundational question for our purpose of marriage. This question is asking you, will you allow yourself to be fruitful? All right, if you say yes, but you don't intend to have children, that's not speaking the truth there. Number 2, have you come here freely to give yourselves to each other in marriage? Are you making this decision freely, or are you under coercion somehow? Lots of different ways for that, right? This is big. Maybe, you had a really good time in Vegas and you went to a chapel on a Saturday night. That probably wasn't a free choice, okay? Are you free? So are you promising that you're free to do this and you're going to be fruitful? The next question, will you love and honor each other as man and wife for the rest of your lives? Are you promising to be faithful? Okay? Are you promising to be faithful? Now, what this means, though, is at this moment, are you promising to be faithful? It doesn't mean later on, if one of your spouses decides to be unfaithful, that it was not a valid marriage. But maybe at this moment, someone has a second person on the side. That they're lying. See what I'm saying? Are you going to be faithful? And then, I know. No, I don't want that one. Stop. Have you come here without reservation to give yourself to each other in marriage? Are you giving yourself totally, not holding anything back, including your sexuality, your ability to create children? And this is how Jesus Christ loved the church. He gave himself freely, he gave himself totally, he gave himself faithfully, and he gave himself fruitfully. That is how he loved his church. So St. John Paul II had this beautiful teaching on, it's called the Theology of the Body. It was actually a series of Wednesday audiences over about 5 years. And anyway, he spoke about this incredible reflection on these things. And we can think of this in this way, that marriage is meant to replicate what Christ did for his church. And you can summarize it with these 4 things. And this is kind of like the benchmark, okay? Are you free, total, faithful, and fruitful? So this is the litmus test, okay? Is this a marriage or not? Is it purpose ordered toward procreation and the unity of the spouses? And does it check off all these boxes? Is it free, total, faithful, and fruitful? Okay? Because if it is, then it'll be a marriage. If it doesn't, then it's not. So in a couple weeks, and we do Commandments 6 and 9, we're going to speak about some of the hot topic things. And these are very important things to talk about, right? Why does the church say that a same-sex attraction cannot be fulfilled in a marriage? Why does the church teach against contraception? Why does the church teach against fornication and cohabitating before marriage? Why does the church teach about all these issues? It's not meant to be a bunch of don't do this, don't do that, don't do this because we're cranky old people. No. It's because these are the guidelines of what a marriage is meant to be that will actually bring us joy and freedom. That will actually be what God wants of humanity. It's so true. So true. All right. Yeah. So, really quick, I want to speak about a hot topic thing of divorce and annulments, because this is something people I have a question about. Before I do that, I'm going to preface with this is a very, very pastoral thing. Okay, just know that I'm going to present material the church teaches, but all these things are taken with each person, just understanding their story and their background and trying to work through a solution to it. No, there's no judgment, no condemnation, because unfortunately the church has expressed that in ways, particularly when we talk about in a couple weeks, and I really hope you come in a couple weeks, talk about like same-sex attraction and the idea of same-sex marriage. The people within the church have said and done things that is not okay. Straight, I will say that because it's true. But that doesn't negate what the church teaches and why. Because love is not simply to tolerate someone's behavior. It is to will their good above everything else. To want them to get to heaven. Right? I showed this scene to my high schoolers. Anybody seen Frozen? You know, the original Frozen, right? It's a great movie. You know? But it's a scene where, you know, where Olaf finishes singing his song about in summer, right? And it's done, and Kristoff's like, if you don't know, just bear with me. He's like, I got to tell him. And Anna's like, no, you can't tell him. You can't make him sad and disappoint him because he's a snowman who wants to be in summer. And Anna's like, no, you can't. Don't tell him. Don't wreck his dream. But Kristoff's like, we got to tell him. What I mean by that is because Anna thinks she was doing something very nice by not telling them because you're going to hurt his feelings. But Kristoff is like, dude, if we let that snowman go into summer, he's going to die. Even though it may hurt someone's feelings, the loving thing to do is to tell them the truth. Right? Tolerating does not equal love. And that's unfortunately what our society says nowadays. That is not love. Love is to will the good of another more than yourself. So we'll talk more about that as we go on, but it needs to be said. So an annulment is fundamentally different than a divorce. An annulment is a declaration of nullity, and this is basically a statement saying that the marriage was not valid to begin with. Okay, whereas a divorce says a marriage was there and it has ended. They are two completely different things. Jesus says that you can never have a divorce. His teaching is clear and explicit. There's almost very few times where Jesus is like, boom, and this was one of them. Okay, it was one of them. Very clear. And there could be lots of reasons for that. Yeah, it's kind of what I stated here. I don't know why I had that twice, excuse me. A civil divorce looks at what caused the marriage to fail or to end, whereas an annulment looks to the beginning of the marriage and says, why was this never a marriage to begin with? Okay, two completely different ideas. Because the reality is, like I said, there's lots of situations where someone thinks they could have been married or wanted to get married, but they were actually under some impediment. Because there are requirements for marriage. If it is something, that means it's not some things, okay? And it goes back to Jesus' teaching on remarrying and committing adultery. And here are some examples, right? As baptized Catholics, we are bound by canon law, by the church law, to get married in the church, to open yourself to grace. Like you are a citizen in the sense of the church. That could be a reason why your marriage wasn't valid. Impediments. You aren't free to marry from various reasons, and there's lots of different reasons this could be. Under coercion, you aren't in the right state of mind, whatever it may be. So yeah, you can read those. And what happens though is this is part of the function of the church, right? Because you got to go back. What is the role of the church? The role of the church is to teach and to protect the truth and to provide the sacraments. When Jesus gave Peter the keys, remember back in Matthew chapter 16, he said, whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth is loose in heaven. This is religious teaching power to make law. So we trust that God has not left the church abandoned, that the Holy Spirit is still working, even though there's a bunch of broken and sinful people in the church, that the Holy Spirit is still working in the church to guide her to all truth. So the church's role is to discern these issues as a group. So what happens is you'll come up and if someone, for annulments, and it goes and you investigate the facts. All right, what was this or not? And the church will make a declaration of nullity or not. And this is a very, very sensitive and pastoral issue. It goes individually, person to person. This is an individual thing, and it's very challenging. But understand that a Catholic annulment is not the same thing as a divorce. They are two fundamentally different things. And what the church will say is that the reality is maybe you're in a situation that is very destructive, right? The horrible things of abuse and all these kinds of things. Separating from a spouse does not equal divorce, right? So if you need to separate from a spouse for whatever reason be, that is acceptable, all right? But that does not mean that you can remarry. Engage in sexual activity with someone else while you are still married. That is the definition of adultery. So that is an overview of the sacrament itself. So the idea today was kind of lay a foundation of what it is And the next, I think in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to talk about some of the things that marriage is not and why, though. And we're going to use the framework comparing those things to what it is. Bring your questions, like the things that we struggle with, because I was there, I'm with you. The things you're like, I don't understand, or I don't get, or I challenge why the church teaches these things. Please bring them, okay? We'll even try to have a little question box, and then we can answer those questions. But just think about this for a second. We're going to close with this. And I think everybody in the room is on board with this, if the purpose of marriage is to help to get the spouse to heaven, if that is its fundamental purpose, every decision we make about marriage should be really simple then. Should be, right? We're broken human beings living in the world. But remember that framework of that marriage was authored by God for a specific purpose and intention. And then we'll compare everything else to that and see how it falls. Let's pray. Loving God, we thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to speak about you and your beautiful sacraments. Please give us the grace to not only desire you, but to know you more, to understand you better, and especially your teachings on how we are called to best get to heaven. We trust in you, Lord, and we ask for your grace. And we ask this through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. And the Father and the Son, Holy Spirit.